Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's session looking at entry, descent, and landing for the Perseverance rover. This session is scheduled just for our high school viewers, where we're going to be joined by some awesome engineers here at JPL to go through the questions you have for entry, descent, and landing coming up on Thursday. I'm joined by two incredible people today, two engineers, G. Cox and Nick Wiltsey, who are going to answer a few of our questions. But before we get into it, I thought I could walk us through some of the things going on at JPL Education and the Mission to Mars Student Challenge that's been ongoing for the last few weeks. So to kick us off, in our first slide here, you'll see that it's never too late to join. Even if you hadn't been participating up to this point, you'll see that we do have a website up that looks at all of the really exciting ways you can participate in the Mission to Mars. We have interactive live streams, we have recorded sessions, this one will be one of them, and lessons tailored to all grade levels, broken down by week, looking at the different components of what it really takes to build, design, send a mission, and land safely on Mars. On my second slide, you'll see my good buddy Lyle, who hosts these weekly videos to kind of set the stage for each challenge. And again, since these are already pre-recorded, you can feel free to kind of pick the things you've missed, or pick the things that you enjoy the most, just so that you can be part of the process. And we've been very, very lucky over here at JPL to see some of the incredible student work that's taken place. So on my third slide, you'll see just how many cool student submissions we've had the privilege of being part of, whether it comes from students just first designing how it is that one gets to Mars, as you can see here, or actually kind of conceptually building what their spacecraft's going to look like. On my fourth slide, you'll see that once students had designed their spacecraft, they were now ready to land safely, or even kind of modeled a launch, right? What would it look like to be able to send a rocket to Mars? So on my fifth slide, you'll see that the website is really a multitude of really cool activities. All of these are standards aligned. All of these are already put together with teachers in mind. So lots of really cool opportunities for you to get engaged in kind of very similar science to what we do over here at JPL. Be part of that thinking process as we get ready for entry, descent, and landing, or EDL. To kind of paint a picture of what this looks like, I thought I would kind of show you guys an animation of what has gone before and what we're looking forward to on Thursday. So if you see in this video, after effectively 7 months and hundreds of thousands of miles, our Perseverance rover is now finally getting close to arriving at Mars. It's encapsulated, if you can imagine, between this back shell and heat shield, which, as it goes through the atmosphere, picks up a lot of heat and friction. We know that the Martian atmosphere is thin, but it's still quite a task to get through safely. Once it does get through, the question is, how do we slow down after traveling tens of thousands of miles per hour? And the first stage of doing that is by launching a supersonic parachute. So this parachute will allow us to begin to slow down, but as we know, the Martian atmosphere is still too thin to just use a parachute. This isn't going to be enough to get us to the ground safely. So instead, we're going to use the sky crane technology, similar to what was used in the Curiosity rover, in which case we drop the heat shield and literally just drop the rover from the back shell, which is a horrifying idea, but because of that sky crane and the retro rockets, this will allow us to kind of slow down as we make our final descent. The sky crane will be scouting the terrain to find the most safe place for us to land, making sure we don't land on any rocks or ledges. And when it IDs the kind of perfect landing spot, it will lower the rover down with a cable as it kind of touches down gently to reach the surface safely. Once it feels that it's landed safely, the cord's cut and the sky crane flies off in the distance, safely away from the rover. And now we've landed safely, right? The robot has been deployed and is ready to begin surface operations. So with this, we will have safely landed in Jezero Crater and be able to really start looking for signs of ancient life. Pretty exciting stuff. So with that in mind, I'd like to turn over to our awesome guests and kind of look at some of the questions you guys have. So looking at effectively two of our very first questions submitted by students. Naji, if you would be willing to take our first student submitted question, we'll have that play.
Hello, my name is Arla Camacho. I am a junior and I go to Westchester Academy for International Studies. My question is, if methane can be produced through many sources, one of them being hydrothermal vents, where organisms can survive, and if methane has been detected in Mars' atmosphere, do you believe that there was or still is any life in Mars? Thank you.
Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm Nagi, and I'm super excited to be here this morning. That's a great first question. So, the thing about methane, right, is it's kind of this mystery. And have we detected it in the atmosphere? Where is it coming from? It's actually just a great example of why we explore, because it's kind of hard to figure out what's going on. The Mars Curiosity rover did in fact see methane. And we think we've seen methane in the atmosphere. So after detecting this, where our understanding of methane from the Earth is that it's related to different processes, some of which are biological. And then we thought, one of the things is that methane in the atmosphere is usually destroyed. And so why is there still methane? So there was actually a mission sent by the Europeans called the Trace Gas Orbiter specifically to go to Mars, look at its atmosphere, and this is one of the questions it's trying to answer. Interestingly enough, so far, TGO has not found methane in the atmosphere, and yet the Curiosity rover is still seeing these spikes, these little whiffs of methane. And so we don't know what might be causing this. It's maybe hard to see from the top of the atmosphere from in orbit where TGO is what might be causing this. So maybe it's something local to Gale Crater where Curiosity is, or something happening underground. So we don't actually know. And that's part of what's so amazing about exploration. And it's a good example of how it can take years to answer a question because the answers aren't always what we expect.
Awesome. And I thought that I had seen somewhere that the methane was seasonal as well. Do you know anything about that?
It is indeed in that, well, it is as much as we know it is, because what we've been seeing is once we saw the first kind of whiff of it on Curiosity, we've been trying to look for it on a regular basis. And we are seeing that it seems to be seasonal. We are seeing that now and then it spikes, but it's not consistent. And again, what we are hoping, to get other data points to try to understand what might be causing this and how often does it happen.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks so much. And we actually have a second video submitted question that I'll hand over to Nick if we can hear that one.
Hi, my name is Daniela Valdez, and I'm a junior at Westchester Academy of International Studies. And my question is, do you believe that humans can live on Mars despite the harsh environment?
Hi, I'm Nick Wiltsey. I'm one of the rover drivers for Curiosity, and I will be one of the rover drivers for Perseverance. It's a great question. I absolutely think that humans can survive on Mars despite the harsh environment. There are a lot of challenges to overcome, but I mean, we have humans living on the ISS, we have humans living in submarines, we have humans living isolated in Antarctica for long periods of time. We have to deal with the lack of atmosphere, lack of liquid water, radiation, the lower gravity, the journey to Mars, and any bone loss density or other issues there. the psychological issues like the isolation, just limited ability to move around. But absolutely, I think all of these things are technical challenges that we can solve. Uh, it's going to be a monumental effort. I mean, you can see the size of the rockets that it takes to get Curiosity and Perseverance to Mars. That's a couple people, and then you need everything, all the food that they need, everything they need to establish shelters and an ecosystem or a way to grow food. There's a lot of details to take care of, but I think every one of those challenges is addressable. It'll take a lot of advances before we can get all the mass that we need there, and then get sufficient people there to set it all up and survive.
Yeah, no time soon. I always like to talk to classrooms. I feel like teachers always really get a kick when you ask young kids, like, how many of you guys want to go to Mars? And all the kids raise their hands, and you can say, we can send you, right? I mean, yeah. And a lot of teachers think, oh, that might not be so bad.
Yes.
Thanks so much for answering those questions. I love that we were able to get these student video questions, and it's always really exciting. We have a ton of questions to go through online as well. So Nagin, maybe I'll throw the first one to you. The question is, because of the fact that, just like Nick was speaking about, the harsh environment on Mars, how do we at NASA kind of plan for rover operations in such a harsh environment? When we think about, exposure to radiation, temperature changes and swings, like how does one kind of plan robotically for that?
So that's a great question. And we do, in fact, schedule the rover's day thinking about where the rover is. So my job on Perseverance is that I'm the deputy team chief of the engineering operations team. I'm also lucky enough to still work on the Mars Curiosity rover as one of the tactical mission leads. So we get a chance, hopefully, to have 2 rovers on Mars and kind of see how they operate differently. So one of the things that we've been doing on Curiosity that we will continue to do on Perseverance is, because it's so cold on Mars, because that is a difficult environment, one of the things that we do is we try to let the rover sleep as much as possible, and then have these periods of wakefulness when she's doing her job for the day. And we schedule that for during the warmest part of the day. She does have the ability to do activities at night, but the same way that you'd have to kind of bundle up and warm up if you were going to go outside and do something at night, the rover is the same. We'd have to turn on her heaters and warm her up so that she could do activities in the Martian night. So we really try to have her do most of her things in the daytime when it's warmer. And in terms of other aspects of the environment, certainly one of the things we do is all of the rovers have had a weather station. And we do things like monitor the radiation. And we do that for multiple reasons. One, so we can get ready for humans to explore Mars by sending information back about the weather on Mars, but also so we can be aware of, is it dust storm season? Is it, what might be the kinds of things that are happening on Mars that would potentially affect the rover? And in fact, that is one of the major things about when a mission lands. Is we're lucky enough that the weather right now on Mars is good, that we are, and we pick our landing times and our trajectories in such a way that we hope, to be kind of after dust storm season, because that's something that will in fact make it more difficult to land and have a successful mission. So Mars weather is something we have to pay attention to.
I had no clue there was a dust storm season on Mars, that this was something we had to plan around. Is there, and maybe Nick, I can ask you this, is there any fear of any spontaneous weather-related events during landing? Is that something that we have to take into consideration as well?
Ooh, I can imagine that there might be. It's fascinating. If you look at the pictures from Curiosity during the last major dust storm that we had, you can see pictures that were taken at the same time of day across a period of several weeks, and the sky just darkens. It is quite black. And so, as you said, we have this landing navigation camera. And so if it can't see through the dust and it can't pick out where to land, I think that would make it a lot more exciting, particularly because it's all autonomous. It's, between 8 and 10 light minutes away. And so by the time it enters the atmosphere and we get that data back, it will be on the ground. So, or what I mean to say is by the time that we get data that it has entered the atmosphere, it'll be on the ground. So there's absolutely no joysticking or feeding it additional information. So I think we know the weather well enough out. There is a season, as Nikki said, we plan for that season, but thankfully it does not look like we're going to have any issues with weather for this landing.
Would you mind, Nick, really quick, kind of following up, because there's a lot of questions online about one of the things you just mentioned, which is this delay, right? This being 8 to 10 light minutes behind. So can you kind of quickly describe what does that mean for us during EDL?
Pretty much we're just waiting and seeing. It's always described as the 7 minutes of terror, and it's because you are just getting this data streaming back that literally you're dropping from orbit, you're just using aerobraking to just bring you down to about 1,000 miles an hour, I think, and then using the parachute to slow you down to 200 miles an hour, and then sky craning down and landing on the surface. And there's absolutely nothing that we can do to control that during the whole thing. So it's all autonomous. We have built this, we've tested it, we successfully did it with Curiosity, we did variations of it for Opportunity and Spirit. We have done absolutely everything we can to make sure that it works properly, but ultimately it's a robot dropping from space onto another planet, and there's nothing that we can do that we haven't already done. So yeah, it's certainly for EDL, it's pretty much just means that we're sitting here biting our fingernails.
It's wild to think about. I see a question here, and it's one that I always kind of have on my mind, which is the evolution in such a short time for these rovers. You mentioned Spirit and Opportunity, and so Nikki, maybe you could kind of walk us through a little bit, like how did the sky crane come to pass? It seems like a absolutely ludicrous idea, and I know a lot of students have asked me in the past, why not just use a bigger airbag system like we had in the past? So what was that evolution kind of, how did that play out?
So this started with the first rover that we landed on Mars back in 1997, and that was the Sojourner, Mars Pathfinder mission and the Sojourner rover. And that was a technology demo similar to Ingenuity, the helicopter that we're taking, where we're really just trying to find out, how does this work on Mars? Can we send a rover, and how do we control it? And at that time, what we were also trying to do was find a way to land on Mars that would work for rovers and that was more efficient and less expensive. And so that was the beginning of the airbag method, where we encased the rover inside of these airbags that then bounced on the surface, rolled until they stopped, and then the airbags deflated and the rover was inside a lander on the surface. That method worked wonderfully in 1997, and we reused that in 2004 with the landings of Spirit and Opportunity, where they were larger rovers which had actual science objectives of finding out if there was past water on Mars at the surface, and it also used that airbag technique. Once we knew that there was liquid water on Mars and the surface, we knew we were going to need to send a bigger rover, and that was the Curiosity rover. That rover was now so big, the Spirit and Oppie were about the size of a golf cart, whereas Curiosity, like Perseverance, is the size of an SUV. And thus, the airbag method wouldn't work anymore, in that the rover was much bigger and airbags would have had to have been so big that it would have kind of lost any mass advantage. And so that's when we started looking at different ways of landing larger payloads on Mars. And we kind of took a page. There were a number of different ways considered, but we took a page from some of the helicopters and military approaches of lowering something from another something that's hovering like the descent stage does, and then having it literally touch down on its wheels. And so this way, we didn't need a landed vehicle, and we didn't need airbags, and the rover was quite literally ready to go the minute it touched down on the surface. And that's what happened with Curiosity, and we are reusing huge parts of that entry, descent, and landing system in 2 days.
Yeah, I want to follow on from that. One of the things that I think is so fascinating about space exploration is just how expensive it is in terms of mass to get something to Mars. I don't know the true number, but it's something like for every kilogram of mass you get to Mars, you need 1,000 kilograms of fuel or something. It is a huge multiplier. And so as we wanted bigger and bigger rovers on Mars, we need to get bigger and bigger rockets, but at a certain point you're constrained. You have the biggest rocket that's available that has the biggest, essentially the biggest heat shield that we can find. And so we have a set mass and a set volume of pack as much rover as you possibly can in here. And so if we wanted gigantic airbags, they would have taken up, so much of that volume that we're constrained. It's no longer the right approach. So we needed to take a different approach that would save us on both volume and mass.
Yeah, it's such a great story, I think, especially for students to see the value of iteration versus invention, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are times when like the airbags could be scaled up and we could make them a little bit better, and there are times when you just got to come up with a brand new idea, no matter how crazy, and kind of reinvent the wheel.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a really, really cool lesson to see like that level of engineering really in practice.
Mm-hmm.
Nick, maybe you could kind of answer a similar question that's coming up, which is, talking about the constraints. What's the most frustrating part of putting the rover together and having this mission? What really hangs you up, and what was the biggest challenge?
There are a couple that I'd call out. One would be, I would definitely say the computer processors, because we're in space, it's a harsh environment, they need to be what's called radiation hardened. So if you take a typical, like your cell phone or your laptop, whatever, the transistors on it are so small that cosmic radiation can change the results of their calculations. So you can have your computer and ask it, what is 2 + 2? And it will tell you 7. And that's very bad. You want to get consistent results. So there are a specific class of processors that are radiation hardened, but virtually no one uses these. They're essentially only useful if you're going into space. So the ones we have are 15, 20 years old. And so it's sort of preposterous how much.
Oh, I think we lost Nick. We'll
So
turn it over to Nikki and kind of go through
Yeah,
the
so I can follow up on that, because I was very much going to say the same thing, right? That it's the fact that we assume, oh, you have the same technology that's like in your cell phone. But as Nick was saying, we're a little bit behind because we have to go through this process of getting our instrumentation and our processors so they can withstand the radiation on Mars, right? And in addition to that, we come back to in terms of challenges, the temperature on Mars and the environment that we're in means that the rover, we have to make sure that the rover can overcome any obstacles that it might have and any challenges that way. But it does mean that therefore the mobility, our ability to drive, is a little bit slower because we need the torque for that environment. We need the ability to go over big obstacles. And so that's one of the things that comes up also is, hey, how come the rovers aren't, putting the pedal to the metal? And the reality is that we need to have, it's a choice between again, it's always the same thing, right? The mass and the ability to drive long distances, to last a long time, and how quickly we can drive and how much power it takes. So that was also in my mind as Nick was answering, was the limitations on the amount of power that we have, whether a vehicle is solar powered or nuclear powered. And so these are all the things that come up when you're trying to do something literally hundreds and millions of kilometers away from the Earth.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier the kind of the energy budget and kind of operating in the day versus the night, and I imagine that there are constraints there too for just daily scientific operations, right? I mean, it's not an unlimited time frame nor amount of electricity that can be used. Can you talk us through a little bit of like what does scheduling the rover's operations look like?
That is a really fun part of the job, is figuring out what happened on the rover on Mars on the sol before us, and then what are we going to do the next sol. So these rovers, and a sol is a Martian day, which is a little bit longer than an Earth day. So on these rovers, because of the one-way light time, we cannot joystick them, right? We have to actually remote sequence them. So we wait until we get the data back from the orbiter. So the rover will do its activities during the day according to the sequence of commands that we send. And then that night it will, or later in the Martian day, it will send its data up to the orbiters that are in orbit around Earth, around Mars. Then that data is sent back to the Earth. And when we get that data, we begin planning for what the rover can do the next sol, now that we know how it went on in this case. And just as Brandon was saying, we don't have, it's not unlimited. We know we have this much time, this much power, and this much data that we can fill. So we start saying, okay, what at a high level do we want to do? Do we want to drive? Do we want to drill? What are the highest the activities that the scientists decide they want to do? And then we go through and schedule them in activities. And so first we'll say, okay, these are the 5, 6, 7 activities, 10 activities that we want to do. Do we have enough power, data, and time to do that? Once we've got that activity plan, then we switch over into changing the activities into exact commands and sequences. So we'll expand that activity plan into the rover operation sequences, which will then package up and send to the rover when she wakes up the next morning, so she'll know what to do on Mars that day. It's super fun to work with a team of people, scientists and engineers, to say, what shall we do on the next sol on Mars?
Yeah, I've always been like really amazed at the degree of complexity of just day-to-day operations. And I think many people at home might have this idea of that someone's driving the rover around with a joystick here, right? And it's like that would be the world's worst video game to watch a 16-minute delay every time you want to move or perform an operation. So it's really crazy to see. One of the things I saw, and just kind of having the teacher's perspective, was how much coding was being done. And do you maybe kind of a good question to kind of answer for our students is, what kind of skills or background would you recommend for students who are interested in having a career like this? Nick's back. We can turn over to him if he wants to take the first step.
Sorry, my internet connection dropped. Consequence of everyone working from home. What I would say is that, certainly direct skills are mechanical engineering, computer science, electrical engineering, sort of any of the STEM fields are the direct intros. But what I think is so fascinating is that we have a huge number of people on the team with degrees that are totally unrelated to anything engineering. And I think it really does, that diversity really does help. What you'll see is that the geologists that come in are able to find insights into what we're doing. The people with art degrees are able to see things in a different way. So what I would say is, STEM is the obvious choice. but it's not STEM at the expense of other things. Because what I think is what really enables JPL in particular to be so successful at doing these missions is having that wealth of experience and that diversity of experience, so that you get things like a sky crane, which I feel like any sane engineer would look at and say, that is a stupid idea. How could that ever work? But then you just get people saying like, no, I think this is a good idea, and you push forward and you go forward. So yeah, I think just saying, uh, engineering in general, but not at the expense of anything else, because you'll end up finding connections with whatever your passion is to whatever it is that you want to do.
And I think I can add to that as well, just as Nick said about the passion being important, is when you think of JPL and NASA and these missions, you probably do tend to think of scientists and engineers. And as Nick said, we all come from surprisingly different backgrounds, but it's not just scientists and engineers, as he was mentioning. There are people from so many different areas, just like any other large scale project. It involves people from all kinds of fields, right? Like we have people who are in the finances at JPL, and people like the ones who are setting up these amazing calls and social media and science communication. We also have artists, as Nick mentioned, that help convey the wonders of what we're seeing. And we have graphic designers and historians. So I think it's about what motivates you, what's interesting to you. These missions are all about curiosity and exploration, and that can show itself in so many different ways. And so it isn't always just, oh, I don't have that background, or I don't think that's for me. If you're curious, that's what makes these missions possible.
Yeah, I just want to build on that I would say absolutely communication is one of the things that is so transformational, that it's so easy to write out a technical report or say, here is how this will work, but it won't capture people unless you're able to effectively convey what it is you believe in about this, or the artistry of it. It's something that you absolutely said, that people think of JPL as being engineers and scientists, and I think so much of the power of what we do comes from the artistry and the communication of it.
Yeah, we really are fortunate to have the types of artistic minds that really do kind of bring what we do to the public, right? Otherwise, how would they know what we're up to, right? I think that's really, really incredible. And I totally agree. I see students all the time, and it's really heartbreaking when they say, like, I'm in a biology class, this is boring, I don't like science. And it's such an unfortunate kind of mindset to say, well, I don't like this part of science, therefore I don't like science. Because as you said, I mean, the breadth of careers at a place like NASA is so wide. Yeah, I mean, every single one of them is critical. I think it's really, really exciting. Maybe you guys could tell us really quick about how it is that you guys came to NASA. Nagi, how did your career path lead you here?
Oh gosh. So for me, I've known since I was 14 that I wanted to work at JPL. And I think that was because when I was very young, I saw in my environment, and also in my within parts of my family, that there seemed to be a different expectation of what boys would do and what girls would do. And I thought, what? Why does it matter whether I'm a boy or a girl? And so I saw when I was young that there are kind of ways we divide ourselves. But I was also lucky enough to be growing up at the end of the Apollo missions, at the beginning of the space shuttle missions. And so I also saw that there were these moments where everyone joined together to watch the space shuttle take off. And I saw how that brought people together. And so that's how I knew that's what I wanted to do, was something that brought people together instead of separating them. So for me, I went into the United States Air Force. I was very fortunate to get a scholarship that helped me go to college, get an engineering degree, and also get some background in space operations while I was in the Air Force, that helped me then get my dream job at JPL. And, I've been there now. I've been at JPL for over 20 years. And the thing is, it doesn't change. It's just as exciting to work with a group of people on a mission to do something that matters as it was 20 years ago. It's doing something that is something you love, and that hasn't changed. It's still just as much fun as the first day I walked through the gates.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's a great story to hear. Nick, do you want to take a stab at this too?
Yeah, so for me, I've always kind of enjoyed space, but I wouldn't say that space was my passion. I remember Pathfinder landing when I was in elementary school sometime, and I got a little sticker for it. I was in college. I graduated and continued on for a master's, and my thesis advisor did a lot of work with JPL in terra mechanics, so sort of soil properties. And so through one of his friends, I interviewed at JPL and started doing robotics work here, which was not Mars work. It was very sort of research and tech development work. So there were 3 of us on the project, and we were 3D printing little robots that could climb walls and experimenting around. And it just so happened that one of the other engineers working on it said, "Hey, I'm one of the rover drivers for Curiosity. Would you be interested in taking part?" Yeah, that sounds interesting. I started working on Curiosity, and then one of the things I think is so interesting is that we use a software suite called RSVP. It's the Robotic Simulation and Visualization Program for rover planning. So I was working with that, and I wanted it to work a little differently. I wanted things to be a little different, and so I bugged the developers until I could get access to the code and started making changes. And at this point, I'm now what's called the cognizant engineer. I'm the sort of the project manager of that software suite, because it's something that just captured me, that I felt like this is something that has such value. When this works better, we get more science back from another world. It's a force multiplier in terms of what we can do. And I really didn't realize it was happening, but it was something like, oh yeah, I'm rover planning with half my time, and now it's full time. I'm working on this software and full into the Mars missions. It's just something that really captured me, that I didn't see coming until I was deep into it, and I love it. I really enjoy what it is that I'm doing.
Yeah, that's really awesome. I think there's definitely a lesson in there for all of us, that your career trajectory is beyond what you can ever know. I always wonder why people still ask, like, what's your 5-year plan or your 10-year plan, as if there's any way to know what's going to happen next. It seems like we always kind of have an idea, but life kind of puts us into different opportunities. We have time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions. There's a lot of people asking actually about what landing is going to look like now in the times of COVID, right? In the past, this was a really, everyone thinks about the video of everyone in mission control and jumping and cheering. What are your guys' plans? Nikki, what will landing look like when we're working remotely?
So it will be different, but we will still be in the control room. I will be in one of the control rooms at JPL in a couple of days, but we want to keep our engineers safe because we have a rover to operate. So there won't be as many people, and many of our team will be watching remotely from their homes, and we'll see them all on our watch parties and experience it together. So we do need to be in the same room, not just to celebrate globally, but also because we are there to see what happens and see if the rover needs us and look at that first information and get going the minute that we land safely. But you won't see as many folks in the control room, and we've done our best to set up cameras in the different places and to acknowledge the amount of the team that might be elsewhere in the building, right? So you'll see the cameras tend to be focused as they are on specific rooms and specific areas, but that's a part of the team. There are so many others that are hopefully cheering from right next door in rooms that you might not see in other parts of mission control, or watching from home, also because they may not be on that first landing shift, but they're coming in a few hours later as we get going for operations on Mars. But COVID or not, and masks or not, I think you'll see a lot of very happy people that are celebrating when we hope this if success comes to us, but just while we're also keeping distant from each other and being safe.
Awesome. So last question for you guys, just really quick, since it's everyone's wanting to know. I'll start with you, Nick. Instrument you're most excited about for Perseverance?
Ooh, I'm really excited about Pixel. It's controlling wise, it's an interesting one because it can move itself at the end of the robotic arm. But I think that'll be a really fun instrument to see how it works.
Awesome. And what about you, Nagid?
Well, I'm a little biased towards MOXIE because I worked on MOXIE for a couple of years, and MOXIE is an oxygen generator that we are prototyping on Mars. So we're taking a little instrument that we hope will help us. It's like a reverse fuel cell that we hope will help us learn how to make oxygen on Mars from the atmosphere. And that is something that we can then use for astronauts when they come to Mars, and also for creating the fuel that they'll need to return. So it's not just it's science exploration, but it's also about getting ready to send folks to Mars. So I'm super excited to see MOXIE make oxygen on Mars.
Yeah, super exciting stuff. I can't thank you guys enough for coming today. Thank you so much to both Nagid Cox and Nick Wiltsey. I hope you guys enjoyed today's session. Please be sure, of course, to watch on Thursday, 11:30 Pacific time, for the pre-landing show, and then get ready for actual EDL shortly after noon Pacific time as well. So we're really excited to have you guys with us. Keep doing all these great lessons. Be part of this challenge. Bring exciting science to your homes, to your classrooms, and join us for landing this Thursday. Thanks so much for joining us, all of you. Looking forward to being part of landing soon, and take care. Thanks so much.
Hi everyone, I'm Emily. NASA is landing the next rover on Mars in February, and they want kids from all over the world to join in the excitement. They're inviting educators and families to lead students in designing and building their own mission to Mars. Then, land with Perseverance on February 18th. It's the Mission to Mars Student Challenge. With 5 weeks of activities, professional development for teachers, and opportunities to chat with engineers and scientists, NASA's Mission to Mars Student Challenge has everything you need to bring students from brainstorming to liftoff all the way to Mars. Register your students today to join NASA as they prepare to touch down on Mars, and I'll see you on landing day. Touchdown confirmed, we're safe on Mars.